Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. So in this video I'm going to be showing you a video I've been looking forward to, well, at least presenting if not making, and that is my World War One tank diorama, as you can see on display right in front of you. So some of you may already know this, but I am quite a history nerd, and also I like history inspired video games, which is why I had invested quite a lot of my time into this game, Battlefield 1. It is one of my absolute all-time favorite video games, and there are loads of scenes in this game which are just an absolute cinematic beauty, and there are some scenes in there which I find are worthy of making a diorama about, and this here is one of them. The scene here depicted is a tank being captured by some soldiers, and I'm going to make a little bit of tweaking to this scene and then present a diorama out of it. So, for those of you who aren't been paying attention to the video footage running in the background, these are things that I've already been showing you. The model of the tank I built, I can't remember, months ago, and these soldiers I bought quite a lot while after that, and I painted them, and it wasn't originally a plan to incorporate all these things into one diorama until I played a few rounds of Battlefield 1 and realized that, hey, this thing could work beautifully together if I just set the scene right. So that's what I decided to do. So I used the game as my primary source of information, and then I looked up pictures like this of ruined tanks used by both sides during World War One, and looked at how they've been placed, how their damage looked like, and yeah, used that as a source of my inspiration as well. But first things first, I guess to tell you what this actually is. These infantry models are made by ICM, and they're called the US Infantry in Gas Mask 1918, and as you can see, they're absolutely beautifully detailed models, and they look absolutely stunning. However, there's one more guy within this diorama, and there's this guy, the German soldier that has been unfortunately killed. I can't remember where I got this one from. I think it was from a Revel kit, so ages ago, and I had to modify him slightly to make him look like he had actually been killed, and that he fit this diorama rather well. So I just used a bit of candle and heated him up and bent his limbs in such a way that they would fit rather good in the diorama. But obviously the absolute center of attention of this diorama is going to be this Mark 5 tank. No, sorry, Mark 4 tank made by Tacom. I don't know how you pronounce it, but this modeling company that produced this absolutely stunning Mark 4 male tank that I'm going to depict. And as you can see here, the model has been already built, and I primed it, and this is just me experimenting with how the layout of the diorama. I decided to use this picture as my primary reference to how I wanted the tank to be placed. I wanted it to be slightly on top of a hill, like look like it's been maybe slid into a ditch, like they tried to go over terrain they weren't actually prepared for, and the tank just slid on and ended up in this sort of little ditch or pond or whatever you're going to call it. And I decided to spice things up a bit by painting it with these colours here that I'm showing in the background. If you want to, you can stop the video and look at the paint scheme I used. Because I wanted to depict the tank as being German, because, well, I just like the colour scheme. I think it's very interesting, and I'm a bit tired just painting everything olive drab, so just to make it a bit interesting. And this is also historically accurate, because although these tanks were made in Britain by the UK and primarily used by the British Army, loads of them were captured by German forces during the war and were put back to use under new management. So that's sort of the idea I'm going for here. A tank that's been captured by the Germans, it's been hit, it's been stopped, and these American troops have been sent out to recapture it. So now that I know the direction that I want to take this diorama in, let's get on to painting. As you can see, I've already started doing this pattern, which was more or less randomly. I just looked up some guides online with historically accurate pictures, and I thought I'm just going to replicate this one. But as I usually do, I start off with an idea, and then I just go off on my own and start doing things. So there's not an exactly historical precedent for this paint scheme I used, nor the colours. It's just because I have these colours lying in my drawer, and instead of using the exact correct ones, I just take whatever I have and I mix them a bit so that they roughly at least look like some historically accurate colours that might have been used. So yeah, this is just me test fitting things, and I was pretty pleased with the camo scheme on this thing. I think it turned out pretty damn good. So I just put figures, as I always do, just randomly, and tried to set the scene for myself. So once the tank was all painted up and done, it was time to apply some decals. But the decals on this thing, well, clearly the kit's been sitting for a while, so the decals were fairly dry and they weren't really usable. And also there are loads of rivets on this thing, which meant the decal wouldn't probably fit properly anyway, so I decided to just make this template for myself and paint within that. And hopefully I hope that it was going to turn out alright. And as you can see, it's not perfect by any means, but maybe it's good enough for what they would have done in the field at the time. So for the diorama base, I just did what I always do. I find some piece of scrap or styrofoam, I panic and put them all over the place and just glue everything together, and then I try and wallet and grommet myself out of the situation using putty or whatever I have available to me. So this time it was this bathroom sealer type of thing, which I've used in loads of my build, and I've started mixing in PVA glue, or wood glue, just to have a different consistency and so that it sticks better to the styrofoam. I usually grab some pretty rough sandpaper and just sand down the styrofoam before I start applying this mixture, just so you know it sticks pretty good to the surface. So I just apply it and well, go on like this, more or less. Use my fingers and just work it into the surface of the diorama. The only reason I've done this is because these materials are readily available to me in my local hardware store, and they're cheap, and so far it looks to be working. But I've also started using this, mixing into the batch. This is just a kitty litter, which have this rather cool little gives us a lusty sort of steam when you pour water in it. I'm not sure it's healthy to breathe it, but you know, it looks like a very good textured surface. And I mix in some paint and some small wood chips and sticks and things, and I just apply that with a brush, like so. And the surface you get then isn't really terrible. I think it's quite good, actually. It's very, well, how shall I put this? Realistic for 1/35 scale, and I think you can use this on all types of surfaces. Like here, I just wanted to go for a muddy and earthy and like torn up landscape, so I wanted it to look as rough as possible. That's why adding all this kitty litter afterwards as well. But if you apply static grass to this, I think it could look pretty good. So here I just added a bit of static grass, just randomly sprinkle it on with some roots and things before moving on to other details like this thing. This is just a brilliant little template I use to make barbed wire fences like this. I just get a piece of wire and just twirl it around these sticks that I've glued on like so, and I form loads of these, at least World War I inspired spikes to put barbed wire in. And also I used a lot of this wood scrap thingies, which, you know, could have been used as barricades at some point, but have been blown apart and torn to pieces. So I just put these all over the diorama, just, you know, to sprinkle in a bit more interesting things and make it look like there's more going on. And I just wanted to at least with the barbed wire, wanted to make it look like the tank has been driving through it and torn it down, which, you know, was one of the two purposes the tanks had in World War I, you know, crossing trenches and cut through barbed wire. And I just put these on in this little hole that's been filled up to put barbed wire around it, and I did the same thing with these wooden posts and pegs that maybe these were put down first, but these have been blown to shreds by artillery, so these metal ones have been put on later on. Who knows? So once all of that was done, I grabbed some of my oil paints for the first time. Yes, I bought oil paints because I still don't have an airbrush. Stupid 2024 and its budget constraints. But I continued with the oil paints and diluted them quite heavily. Never used them before, so this was the first for me as well. I just went randomly spreading them all over the diorama base, and I wasn't super pleased, but this would have to do for the moment, because the next thing I went on to do was starting mixing some resin and filling up some ponds and all the little lakes and things, because I'm going to add quite a lot of resin to this build. But the first thing I did was trying to seal the base off like this, and I've had mixed result with resin before, or I've had a lot of bad result with resins, so I found this technique works pretty good. First I seal everything with the resin, and then I go on to test fit everything like so, and you can see the tank looks like something bought at Toys R Us. But anyway, I just want to test fit things because I wanted things to be submerged in resin, like the Kill German Soldier, maybe his rifle and some boxes and things and tools, and also part of the barbed wire is going to be submerged. So I want to test fit everything one last time before actually committing, and I feel like this is a step that I really can't do enough of, no matter how many times I do it. So for the next thing, I tried using this Tamiya masking tape, also for the first time, because I've had, as I mentioned, quite a lot of issues before with the resin just pouring out all over the place. So I've seen, I think it was Night Shift or for Plasma, I can't remember, but one of them had great results with using Tamiya masking tape. So I thought I'm just going to give that a go and try and seal everything as tight as I possibly can. So that's what I did, and yeah, took some time, used up quite a lot of my masking tape, but it worked out pretty good. And I also used this natural water from Fala, which is kind of resin, to sort of seal the gaps between the diorama and the masking tape. And as you can see, I just used it on all the surfaces to make sure that too was watertight, so there would be no chance of resin pouring out over my desk, as has happened several times before. Next, I moved on to securing pieces of diorama, like my dead German soldier, and got drilled a hole in it and inserted a little piece of wire. Same thing with the Americans, I drilled a hole in their boots and added a piece of string so that they won't fall about and flip over, just to secure them to the base. I then went down to using this thing, which is actually a product for fixing holes in cars, which makes, in my mind, perfect barbed wire. I just coat them with black paint, and voila, you have something that realistically looks like barbed wire, and also it's very, very cheap, which is the main reason I use it. After that, I went on to mixing the resin, and I just used this cup to measure how much resin I'm going to pour in. As you can see, I have this handy toothpick sort of thingy just telling me how much resin I'm supposed to pour in, and I'm always nervous when working with resin because I have so much mixed results, but mixing in some pigments and some brown paint, and I got it to the color that I was pleased with, and yeah, it's sort of see-through, but not much. When I pour it in, you can see through the top 4 or 5 millimeters, I think, and that was, yeah, looks really good. So when I pour it in, I just go around the edge like this with the toothpick, making sure that the water accumulates in a realistic way, and so there's no like sharp or unnatural edges along the line of the water. Same thing here, there are a lot of rocks and little pieces all along the edge with the German helmet, for instance, and the rifle and things, and I just want to make sure that it looks natural, it looks realistic, and yeah, like the water's been flowing in a natural way. This I'm actually nervous for. Just moving a bit closer to the barbed wire. Oh shit, there he goes. I'm sorry. What do you think? So when I was done pouring all the resin, I felt quite pleased with myself because obviously, as you can see here, my masking technique worked. The Tamiya putty and then the way I sealed it worked absolutely beautifully well, and just this extra piece of tape that I added on, yeah, it sealed it perfectly. So I'm going to continue doing this from now on because I thought the result of this worked absolutely beautifully. As you can see here, there are no air bubbles left in the resin, and the surface looked like glass absolutely perfectly. There's no residue that has been spilled out and everything, and removing the masking tape also is absolutely no problem. You just have to work with it a bit, but there's no need for sandpaper or sanding it down or anything like that. The only thing you have to do is grab your razor or X-Acto knife and just trim off the edge on top here, because the water will accumulate on the edges there, so I just trim this off and then I add a piece of lag on top. Eventually though, it was on with weathering the tank, and I do sometimes dread weathering things because I'm not very good at it, and I think it's pretty hard making it look realistic. But what I do usually is just coat the entire thing with enamel thinner and then use oil paints. So I'm going to go through here in a detailed way and show you every trick I used. Yeah, sorry I didn't do that. You know, sometimes when you work on model kits like this, you're just in the flow and you just think, I'm just going to go ahead with this because I'm just in the mood for doing things like that, and then you just forget putting up your camera, or you're not really, you know, filming interrupts modeling. It really does sometimes, so sometimes you just need to enjoy the process and go on forward, you know, undisturbed. But what do you think? I think this actually turned out really, really, really well. I'm pretty proud of this. It looks weathered, but not over weathered, you know, because that's what I really didn't want it to look too worn. Just, you know, enough. And I think I really nailed the look I was after. But as typical for me, I start doing things without thinking. So what's happened here is that I'd glue the tank in place with the resin before I'd filled it up with mud and things to make it look like it'd been sinking into the terrain. So it was time for me to do what I do best and start to Wallace and Gromit my way out of the situation. So here I just went in another time with the same sort of putty mixture that I've used several times before. It's a mix of PVA, glue and clutter and things, just to make sure that the transition from the terrain and up to the tank looks realistic and it filled in well. And I also wasn't very happy with the way the surface turned out, so I went over the entire surface again with a much finer gravel and sand mixture, which had to be glued down with a water and PVA glue mixture as seen here. And after that it was time for another round of painting. But this surface looks a lot better than the first one, and I was really glad I did this. So yeah, sometimes it pays off not planning things, and sometimes it does. For the final few steps, I decided to repaint the entire base, and I went on with oil paints again, and I just mixed all the tones of brown and blackish colours and some reddish colours that I have, and tried to do some highlighting with a rather dry brush and just working in the details just to make it look around like it has some different textures and maybe different layers of soil. And yeah, I think this worked out pretty good. It looks a lot kind of convincing in my mind at least. So yeah, pretty happy with this, and also no airbrush still, so it's the best I can do. But there were a few details I felt was missing, so I just added these crates and, you know, tools and supplies, so it makes it look like this tank has been broken down out in no man's land for quite a while, and maybe the Germans were out there trying to recover it, and they've been undertaking some work when the American patrol showed up and surprised them. So yeah, that's the end of the build the diorama. Now it's just on to the final assembly and showing you the final result. So hope you like it.